Kaila, I hear the passion, and I would like to ask you, what or why have you decided to choose this particular topic?
So, for those that don't know, which is actually not that many of you, every Saturday I teach kids how to sail. During the summer, I'm a full-time employee at Kailua Yacht Club, and I work with kids ranging from as small as 5 to as old as 16. And even though I've only been a paid employee for the last about year and a half, I've learned immensely how much of an impact parents have on their children. I've seen how different children react to different situations and seeing their parents interact with them when they are dropping off their children or picking them up just a couple hours later. And with that position, with that job, I've seen how when a parent is frustrated, that a child is also frustrated. And that just as simple as one interaction with a situation like that, it's really opened my eyes to how important parents are in your life.
Thank you. Thank you. Judges, do you have questions?
I do. So good job, Kaila.
Thank you.
Really well done. You referred to the Kongsong, is that right?
Yes.
Kongsong tribe in Namibia, about how much they touch their children and youth. Why did you choose that group? Did they have some kind of characteristic later in life or a better family bond that you noticed?
Mm-hmm. So this tribe specifically has they're a very close tribe. They're one big family. And so I used a very Eastern example because it shows that even outside of America, there's different parenting techniques that has proven to reinforce that bond between a parent and a child. And when a parent in America is considering different options, because when you're expecting a child, I would think you would read books, I don't know. I don't have a kid. But it was interesting to explore different techniques outside of a Western parenting technique. And parents don't typically look at other parenting techniques outside of an Eastern technique. Any questions?
Thank you, Kaila. Well done.
Thank you.
This is something I think about quite a bit, having 2 kids, trying to figure it all out. So you've given me some food for thought. Thank you.
Yes.
I really like your principle that as parents, our discipline and engagement with our kids mirrors God's discipline and love for his children.
Yes.
Do you think that God, though, sometimes allows distress and anguish, even for the children he loves, to grow us into maturity?
Yes, I'm going to answer that. Yes, God does cause anguish. In Job, Job was tested, and even though that was a difficult time, yes, that can be paralleled with children and parenting. A parent, yes, God has an unconditional love for us, and yes, a parent would have an unconditional love for their children. And in a situation when a child is in anguish, a parent, by reassuring to their child that they're there to support them, and yes, this is a difficult time, this is how we can grow together. This is how we can better understand the consequences, the situation, and just mature together. Any other questions?
I have a question. Great job, Kaila. Thank you very much. So attachment parenting is actually a widely discussed topic in the adoption world.
Yes.
In your research, did you come across any data regarding attachment parenting success in biological versus adopted children?
I did recently look that up, actually. I found that in the adoption process, when you have a new child in your home, that it may be difficult to form that attachment. The attachment period, there's a period where the parent and the child bond, is going to take longer, but it will be worthwhile children who are adopted may have symptoms of RAD, and even though that typically happens in the first 3 years of life when a child is constantly moving from home to home, and attachment parenting has been, yes, a marathon, but it has also helped the parent understand where the child is coming from, because knowing the adoption system, it is a brutal system sometimes. And hearing Braun's speech last, there are situations where a child, it's difficult for them to cope. And it's difficult for them to move on to that, into that new chapter of their life. And attachment parenting can definitely help the child and the parents learn the differences. And it has helped parents be able to assess the situation betterly when a child is in distress, especially a child that has PTSD or RAD from their past chapter. A parent is able to understand why, so that the two can grow. Yeah.
And so you made reference to RAD. Could you just tell all of us what RAD stands for?
If I could
I'm
recall.
sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No. It's a disorder, but reactive adoptive
Attachment disorder.
attachment disorder. That's what it was. Reactive attachment disorder, and these children typically lie a lot. They steal. Overall, just some sort of behavior that would frustrate a parent, frustrate a caregiver. And that's why attachment parenting is typically difficult with these children, but it can be done, and it has proven to be worthwhile with children from these backgrounds, because these children can learn to trust again. And that's the importance of attachment parenting, is trust. That is the foundation of it.
Thank you.
Kaila, then, would you say that attachment parenting is really for all families?
Yes, it can be. And I would recommend at least trying it. In children with special needs, by parenting, talking to their children and developing that very strong communication system, they're able to understand why the child is reacting in a certain way. And for kids that are socially need help, they're able to understand why the kid is acting that way. In other special needs situations, physical or mental, a parent is, again, able to understand why the child is feeling that way, and the two of them can find a medium ground where the child can be interactive in all these situations, and the parent can help the child grow. It's a maturing process.
So just a point of clarification. So with attachment parenting, are there any circumstances where corporal discipline would be appropriate?
So the purpose of me addressing corporal punishment in my thesis is to recognize that corporal punishment is often used out of frustration. I did find 6 principles that you can, or questions that you can ask yourself before spanking or using corporal punishment, and those questions or principles are effectively, calmly, sparingly, on the bottom, and no more than twice in a row. And another aspect of those principles is to communicate. And that way the child understands why there is a spanking, and the parent is not using it out of anger or frustration, because quite frankly, from what I know and from my research, corporal punishment is used mostly out of anger. And I think that's something that needs to be brought up, is how we can better assess the situation and use corporal punishment effectively and calmly.
So you'd be in support of corporal punishment under the right circumstances, and that would be consistent with attachment parenting?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
I have one for you, Kaila. So you talked about the 4 types of parenting, and
Yes.
authoritative as one. The AP is a technique that's just maybe one aspect underneath authoritative parenting. Did you come across any others as you were doing your research, and why in particular did you choose attachment parenting?
So I did not look up so the 4 types of parents is just a general categorization of the types of parents. They're very vague in a way because every parent's not going to pinpoint on each 4 type. Attachment parenting, I just found, was more used by the authoritative family group, and it aligned with what an authoritative parent would follow. And why did I choose attachment parenting? The big question. I initially wanted to do my thesis on the attachment theory because I saw how my peers and the kids that I surrounded myself, how they reacted in certain situations, how they saw their friends as a parental figure in their life. And I remember talking to Mrs. Keene one day in speech class about, I said, I'm going to do the attachment theory. And she goes, attachment parenting? That's great. And so I looked into it and I realized that the root of it all is your parents. You've heard, if you're here last night, my classmates mentioned how in teenage smoking and drinking, how the way to start is by informing parents. In hypermasculinity, the way by a father showing his son his emotions is by showing him that it is masculine to be vulnerable. And that just proves that parents really are where it all begins. And the first way to form a healthy relationship and have a healthy child is by bringing awareness to the importance of that open relationship.
And was there anything in your research that you came across that surprised you? I surprised myself, really. I can tell you, a year ago, in about a couple of weeks, I made kids clean for 4 hours, 20 of them. I made them fold every single sale we could possibly find and rearrange everything, color order, number order, you name it. And looking back at that and how I've interacted with kids since then, I've grown immensely. And I've seen how instead of making kids clean or run laps or swim laps, I can sit with the child and discuss to them why they're feeling this way and how I can serve them, but I can also tell them what my desires are as an instructor. And I'm finding that in my research that attachment parenting is very controversial. A lot of people aren't too fond of co-sleeping and feeding on demand and constantly being attentive to a child. And I will say this, with co-sleeping, the American Pediatric did not disprove it, so that still stands. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, Kaila, we definitely have texts coming through, and so I thought I would share some with you. In light of the last question, would you say, or there is some argument or some thoughts that this sounds like spoiling the child?
Ooh.
What would you say is the difference between attachment parenting and child-centered parenting?
So child-centered is often associated with helicopter parenting. Child-centered is where, so authoritarian parents, they have high expectations for the child and expects the child to reach those expectations. And with child-centered parenting, that's what it is. It is expecting a child to meet those expectations and fulfill what the parent desires. But with this ideology, it also closes off any growth. There is no way for a parent or a child to express what they want. And I've seen in numbers and research how it's mentally damaged a child in a way. How the child just feels like I'm in a box. And we don't want that for kids because we want them to be able to explore their God-given potential. And child-centered parenting does not allow that.
So Kaila, are you familiar with shepherding a child?
A little bit.
Okay, so here at Trinity, we definitely talk about that. And would you say that might be in line with attachment parenting?
It is. I've been at Trinity since preschool, and I've seen how whenever I've been disciplined, that the faculty member or the teacher or the students that are involved in the situation, how we sit down and we discuss. And then after discussing what was done wrong and how we can grow, we pray. And that is definitely a strong aspect of attachment parenting and shepherding a child, and definitely one of the foundations of Trinity.
I'll keep going. I have quite a few questions. One statement says, "This sounds very time-consuming."
Mm-hmm.
Can two working parents, especially here in Hawaii, we often have two-income families, can two working parents use attachment parenting?
They can. For small children or infants, if you are allowed to bring your child into the workplace, I would recommend that. If it is a child-friendly work environment, which is sometimes put in the policies in your contract, you can wear your child to work. And so that would be for infants. And with older children, when you come home from work and you sit down and have a family dinner and discuss how your day is, that's just step one to building that. And I think that, like I said, for children and teens, grabbing coffee or lunch would help with that. And just talking about what's going on in life would help with that attachment. And it's essential that parents talk to their children about what's going on in lives, because I can certainly tell you with my generation, we're looking down more than half the time, staring at a screen. And I think it's important that we detach ourselves from that and become attached to our parents, because one day we're all going to go off to college, and we're going to have to be staring at a screen to talk to our parents. And that's different from sitting down and having dinner with them.
Would you say that attachment parenting is limited just to mom and dad?
No, it's absolutely not. I've used attachment parenting on the kids I teach. It's helped me become a better friend. I've been able to, whenever my friend is struggling with something, I'm able to sit down with them and discuss to them what's going on, and I'm able to discuss to them what their pains, feelings, or concerns are, because that way I can support them. I can become a more supportive friend and encourage them. So,
as you were teaching sailing,
yes.
Did you notice that the kids who come from attachment parenting backgrounds had a harder time leaving their parents to go sail? Or did they have meltdowns when they're like, my parents away from me, I can't handle it? Or have you had any experience like that?
I have not. I've frequently seen children who have parents that force their kids into a situation, and the child is in distress, and there's arguing between the parent and the child, how the child just wants to go back to their parents. They're not excited to be on the water away from their parents. And strangely enough, that's heartbreaking to me, because it steals a child the chance of being able to explore, go on a fun adventure one day. And the reason why the child is so attached to their parents in that moment of frustration is because there's a constant need and a constant pull from both of them. It's like the child is trying to prove a point. That's what I've seen, at least. The kids that have attachment parents, they're so excited to go and sail for a little while. They're excited and they want to keep sailing. And when it's time to get picked up, all they do is talk nonstop to their parents about it. And that just shows the enthusiasm that the child or the children from these families have.
I have a very good question. What age does attachment parenting extend until? You've talked about newborns, even teenagers, but for example, if your child is 18, how are parents supposed to balance their child's independence as they get older?
So attachment parenting develops with the child. When the child is beginning to become an adult and leave the nest, by that time, a parent is just encouraged to communicate with their children. And by using attachment parenting and a parent, again, showing their child the most accurate human self that they have to offer, they are showing the child that, look, I am your friend, I am here to support you, I'm not against you, and I want you to know that even though you're leaving me and becoming an adult, that you can come back home, and that you and I can, sit down and just chat. And I think that's very important, especially as you get older, because you're not always going to be at home with your parents. And so when a child comes home to be with their parents, there should be that excitement to converse with them and share stories with each other. And attachment parenting 100% enforces that.
So let's go back to a newborn or to a toddler. At what point do you recommend that parents stop sleeping with the child, the co-sleeping?
1 year. And that is because a child at that point is getting a little too big for the bed. The co-sleeper that is often used in co-sleeping, a child is too big for that sleeping arrangement. And if a parent were still to want to do co-sleeping with the child at that age, I would say the max is 1.5 years, and by that point, a child should be in their own separate sleeping arrangement. Yeah.
Judges, do we have any other questions?
I just have a quick follow-up on that last
Yes.
comment. So at age 1, when you make that transition, wouldn't that create a lot of distress for the child who's now not in the bed anymore? And wouldn't you have to just have them cry it out at that point?
In attachment parenting, a parent would be with the child in their own room, in the child's room, and the parent would fall asleep on the futon or sleeping mat that the child has until the child falls asleep, so that the child knows that the parent is there with them. And once the child falls asleep, the parent can leave and go to their own room. But just by a parent falling asleep next to their child, it shows that the child is safe. And for young children, that's something that is really important, is feeling safe, because children are afraid of the dark. And having a parent there next to you is reassuring. At least I can speak for myself on that.
Kaila, thank you very much.
Thank
Well
you.
done, everybody.